Please welcome Kristen Smith, President at Solana Policy Institute, and Bo Hines, CEO at USAT.
There he is. Hi, Bo.
Hello, Kristen. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I don't know if you just heard, but Greg gave a fantastic overview of all of the work that you have achieved in the first half of the year before your new job. So I'm excited about the conversation today. Before we get started with Bo, which I'm incredibly excited about, I do want to point out one thing. This, I do believe, is crypto's most consequential year. And this was not a given. Like, there was no guarantee that this consequential year was going to happen. And I really want to give credit to Kyle. I guess it was about 18 months ago, I think David Sachs, who obviously went on to the White House to be the AI and crypto czar, was hosting a fundraiser in San Francisco for Donald Trump. And I remember I wanted to go to that fundraiser because Trump had said pro-crypto stuff. And for 4 years in my prior role as CEO of the Blockchain Association, I'd been trying to get a phone call with the White House, and they would not get back to us. It was really quite terrible the way that we were treated. And so I was like, wow, this guy's open to crypto. I would like to go. And I told a few people in my orbit and on my board, and they said, absolutely not, Kristen. You cannot choose sides. You have to work with both sides of the aisle. Like, you can't go, you can't go. And there was a huge pressure not to go, and as a result, I didn't. But Kyle did, and I think that's like a really brave thing to do, to have conviction like that and to take a bet like that, because Trump, through that event and many others that followed, really started to learn about the problems that the crypto industry had and made a big difference. So I think kudos to him. And I don't think even a year ago after the election, I could have imagined that we would have had somebody like Bo Hines in the White House who was working day in and day out on crypto policy. So really excited to have him here today. My hope this morning is that we can talk a little bit about your time at the White House, Bo, but then also talk about your new role as the CEO of Tether here in the United States. So very exciting. But going to the White House, so I think there's a couple of major things that you achieved. I think the first and most important one was to stop the harm that had been put into place via litigation and regulation. Can you talk a little bit about when you showed up at the White House, sort of what the roadmap was, what you set out to achieve, and how quickly, sort of you were able to stop some of the bad things that had happened?
Sure. Well, I think you described it well, and Greg did a phenomenal job there at the end. I caught the last half of that. It had to be a sea change. I mean, basically everything that happened in the space over the course of the last decade had been policymaking through prosecution. And the president said it best at the first White House Crypto Summit, in which Kyle was an attendee. He looked at the Winklevoss twins from Gemini and said, you had a better chance of sitting in a jail cell last year at this time than you did sitting in the White House. And I repeat that sentiment quite a bit because I think it's true. And we have to recognize how far we've come over the course of a year, given the foundation that had been laid and kind of more or less the standard that had been set in years past. And so, David and I connected on transition, and we started to discuss how we were going to deliver on the president's promises to this ecosystem. And there were many ideas, as you know, Kristen, from your time at Blockchain Association. Not all bad ideas, but not all great ideas either. And so we had to sort through this and kind of flesh out exactly what the roadmap would be to make the United States the crypto capital of the world. And that's what we were keen on doing and delivering on the president's promises. And, we had a couple of options. We could have moved market structure first. We could have moved the stablecoin legislation first, or we could have moved them together. And I think this was kind of the crux of the debate that raged on for the first few months. Aside from the fact that we understood we had to eradicate all of the Biden era regulations that basically prevented digital asset firms from interacting with traditional financial institutions, otherwise known as Operation Choke Point 2.0. And so we set these parallel paths. We said we're going to tackle these rules and regs that are very bad for the space and kind of knock them out one by one. And then we're going to start this long long-form building process of creating the architecture for what would be the next generation of the financial system here in the U.S. with integrating these very important and crucial technologies. And so ultimately, the rest is history. We focused on Genius. We felt as if with Genius, we could create new payment rails in the U.S. and lay the foundation for a brave new world of finance, get to a place in which a lot of the technologists in this space had dreamed up for quite some time, where we can have 24/7 markets and tokenized public securities, and really position the U.S. to be at the forefront of innovation as it pertains to digital asset technological development. And that certainly wasn't an easy effort to achieve, but thanks to Kyle, the other founders, the folks that have persisted for nearly a decade in the space with complete headwinds. Now that we finally had the tailwinds at our back, and thanks to efforts from people like yourself, Kristen, we were able to get Genius done. And so now, I look at this as a spectator from the outside, like many of you guys do, as it pertains to the market structure legislation with clarity. But I'm very encouraged by what I see over the course of the last few weeks. I have full faith and confidence in David and Patrick Witt, who is now my replacement in the White House, to do their job to deliver this next piece of what industry needs, just in terms of, no pun intended, but complete clarity of who the regulator is, what the rules of the road are, and what are the boundaries that they can build with that. And I think we're on the precipice of a very exciting time.
I do want to get deeper into the Genius Act, but before, I think one thing that is a really remarkable product from your time there was the report that resulted from the executive order that Trump relatively early on signed. And I think, it's a blueprint. It really shows, like, you can look at the back and it's like, these are the issues, this is the agency to solve it, we need this authority from Congress. And I think it's also empowered, as Greg was talking about, the SEC's Project Crypto with Chair Atkins' speech. But can you talk a little bit about the significance of this report and the work that went into getting that out the door?
Yes. Well, look, the president had set up, obviously this outside support with the Crypto Council, and then we had the president's working group on digital assets, which was comprised of the internal actors of the admin. That would be the SEC, CFTC, Treasury, Commerce, even DOJ, all the relevant players that might have some policy inputs as to what happens in the space. And the president was extremely proactive in ensuring that we were actually working on a comprehensive regulatory framework. It could be used to be a guidepost for Congress and others who were looking for the rules of the road and what implementation would eventually look like. And so we started on this project really at week one, as soon as we got into the White House. And I give so much credit to folks that are in other areas inside of the admin, like Tyler Williams at Treasury and Taylor over at the SEC, Harry Jung from the CFTC, who eventually came over to the White House, and all of these contributors to this piece of work. I firmly believe it's one of the most comprehensive, regulatory guideposts that's ever been created for this space. And I think that the rest of the world will look at this document. I say document, I think it's 180 pages. It's more or less a book. But I think that folks will look at this work and say, this should be the standard that we should seek to implement throughout the rest of the world. And certainly, if you want to be competitive in the space, I think you're going to have to mirror what we do here in the U.S. And so we felt like giving this comprehensive framework would be extremely important for years to come. And obviously now we see Congress working their way through clarity on market structure. I'm hoping that this document served as a tremendous guide to their work and what they've been pursuing, but it seems as if that it has. And that was the intention. So when we land the plane on market structure, I feel as if we've delivered on the vast majority of the promises the president made to this community when he was on the campaign trail. And more importantly, it positions the U.S. to undoubtedly be the crypto capital of the world and attract these builders and founders that maybe have been a little bit trepidatious or scared to come back here and work domestically, given the fact that they will have a clear set of rules to abide by.
I want to get into the Genius Act a little bit. One of my colleagues just got back from Korea a couple months ago, and he said when he was there, everyone was speaking Korean, and they had these translators, and they would be saying all this stuff in Korean, and he'd hear Genius Act, and then there would be more Korean and Genius Act, and that everyone in the international world was talking about the Genius Act. What do you think are the geopolitical implications of the Genius Act and the role that stablecoins are going to play in the system going forward?
We have to look. I mean, I think this is the future. And as what was kind of played in this preliminary video, it's like we have the opportunity now to use products that benefit us in a way that we've never seen before, with more cost-effective transactions, instant settlement times, more security and transparency. These are all things that institutions and consumers alike should be eager to take advantage of. And we're seeing that now. And so, post Genius, we live in a world in which, through preemption with the OCC, you can have a product that banks can treat as a dollar that's front-facing with stablecoin technology undergirding it. And, consumers in the U.S. have a much different approach to these financial products than others in the rest of the world. And I think it's something that's very important to understand. Stablecoin adoption to this point has been more driven by consumers looking at this as a hedge against volatility to their own domestic currencies. And in the US, obviously, we don't have this issue, and our payment rails are about 90% efficient already. I would argue that Genius takes us to maybe 95% efficiency, and then we'll see L1s and other rails compete to take us to the nth degree of efficiency, right? And so it's created a fintech race in that regard. And then I think that U.S. consumers will have to be trained how to use these products. And so as we talk about adoption, I think about horizontal adoption and then vertical integration. From a B2B perspective, and most of these larger banks and financial institutions already see how important these products could be for their businesses, whether it's with internal settlements, cross-border payments, or even through their wealth managers, offering them another tool that allows them to serve their customers and save their customers money. So we'll see that process streamline probably fairly quickly over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. But I think what's more interesting is how consumers will interact with these products. And I think that in order to encourage this, you have to be participating in verticals in which banks would with a normal US dollar and a treasury that's sitting in their reserves, right? So you think about commercialized lending products, and you think about, a multitude of avenues in which consumers can actually use these to their benefit and achieve the value and accrue that value. And so, we're thinking about that in the sense of how do we build this infrastructure that actually provides on and off ramps for the products and encourages U.S. consumers to engage with them, because at the end of the day, it certainly provides the U.S. Consumer with a lot of savings, but there has to be the motivation to actually engage, right? And so there obviously is at a macro scale for institutions. I think that slowly but surely we'll start to see this happen at the same level from a consumer adoption perspective as well.
Before we switch over to your new role in Tether, are there any fun facts or stories from the White House that you hold dear that you'd like to share with the group?
Oh man, there are plenty, but I know for the sake of time, I'll refrain from telling too many. I think that leading up to the days of the Genius passage in the House, I think one of my most memorable moments is sprinting across the White House lawn from Treasury in order to get a brief ready for our boss, who is dealing with some, I'll call them defectors at the moment, who eventually came back on side. And that was certainly quite the experience. But look, I just had so much fun working with the team that was there. And that's something that I miss the most about being in the throes of it. And again, watching as a spectator on the outside, there are things I miss and there are things that I don't. I don't envy the stress that I can assume that Patrick and Harry are under currently as in the pressure cooker with Clarity. But truly just the friendships and the relationships that were built, out of the process of trying to do something that seemed quite Herculean in order to pull everyone on side, whether it be, the banking lobby, the fintech developers, or the folks working in Web3, the DeFi community. And there's a lot of interest to balance. And I think that was, a tremendous experience that can't be replicated. And so now that I'm doing this from the private sector, I'm certainly having a lot of fun and building new relationships and, establishing our team here. But just being in the throes of it every day is different. It's a different level of energy that comes with that, a different level of stress, certainly. But we had a lot of fun, and just engaging with the boss who is so encouraging and so active and so present throughout the process, and that includes David Sachs as well, who's just a brilliant human being. But having the president's buy-in and him understanding how important this technology is for U.S. leadership made our lives a heck of a lot easier. And so I know that now Patrick's accruing that benefit in his current role, and that's what makes me so confident that they will be able to get clarity passed and be able to, build this entire regulatory framework that's necessary.
Let's talk about Tether. So Tether is, I think, a fascinating company, and one for a long time, it seemed to be a very strategic decision to not come anywhere to the United States. The people from Tether didn't come to the United States. They did not serve the United States. Like, they were very much trying to stay out of the borders here. And quite frankly, that may have been a smart move, as we saw from some of the earlier eras of crypto policy that Greg walked us through. But how did the conversation come up, and how did you end up in the role that you're in today?
It's a good question. I honestly, when I left, I had no idea where I was going to end up. I had started an investment firm called Nexum Capital with two other partners that had grown to be a decently substantial enterprise over the course of the last few years. And so obviously I was going to go back there as a GP and help my partners. But I knew I wanted to be engaged in this ecosystem in a much deeper way. And I started to receive a few different offers from folks as I had stepped out and started to flesh through what those looked like. And as I was contemplating what the future of finance was going to be and what we were attempting to shape, I felt like there was no better opportunity than to join the company that I believe is firmly positioned to be honestly one of the greatest financial companies that's ever existed. And I say that given the fact that they have 500 million customers. They're mostly serving underbanked, underserved, and debanked folks throughout the rest of the globe that have no access to financial products and or technologies. When they first started Tether, they were told that this group of people that they were looking to serve was a niche, right? And now it's grown to be further, or more than 500 million people that are engaging these products on a day-to-day basis that are offered from Tether. And the one thing I love about this company as well is that we've not even begun to scratch the surface of what we can do domestically. And so I think the power of being able to connect these corridors from the deepest capital markets in the world to all these places that are building and still growing is a tremendous recipe for success. And it's great for the United States of America in terms of its dollar dominance. And it's great for the rest of the world that actually needs access to these products in order to be a part of the banking system. And so, we'll obviously be focused on building our infrastructure out here. And that's what we've done throughout the rest of the globe as well, is ensuring that there are actually ways to use the product and that we can provide utility to the customers engaging with us. But Tether itself is much more than just a stablecoin business. It's a tech platform. And anyone that's had the privilege of watching Paolo, our Tether International CEO, give a presentation, starts to realize very quickly that, yes, despite the fact that stablecoins are the core business, we're engaged in many different verticals, whether it be AI, whether it be in media, whether it be in P2P communication, whether it be in robotics. Tether has grown into quite the expansive operation. And this gave me the comfort that I needed, that I was going to be able to touch and actually be hands-on in building a lot of what the future of technology would look like. And I certainly think Tether is the best place to do that. So now, obviously, with USAT coming to America, we have this small little project that we've been working on over the course of the last few months. And we feel really good about where we're positioned. And Anchorage will be the issuer of this stable, which means it'll be fully OCC compliant. And actually, the first fully OCC compliant stable that's available in the marketplace. Obviously, that will change over the course of time. We certainly want to encourage others to go there and get that license and start engaging with this technology. However, again, I think that we're focused on this horizontal integration aspect. We certainly understand the demand is going to be there from a B2B settlement perspective. As I talked to, banks globally, one of the problems they were having is that there's not a product with enough liquidity in emerging markets right now in order to get off of large sum transactions without losing bips. I think that we'll be able to provide that solution very quickly. But it's exciting for us, and we're establishing our U.S. headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is a place that's near and dear to my heart, where I was born and raised. And we like to refer to ourselves as the mini finance capital of the U.S., obviously, given the fact we have Bank of America and Truist and many other large-scale banking operations that are based there. But I think that the name of the game for Tether and for others is going to be how quickly we can integrate these technologies into the financial institutions and allow for consumers to engage with them, even if they don't recognize the product that they're working with. And if you can make it as seamless as possible, the easier it's going to be. And that word seamless is important for USAT and USDT, given the fact that these products will be seamlessly interoperable. And so we will have one-to-one exchange mechanisms, whether it be through crypto native exchanges and or financial institutions that can be set up from a technical perspective in many different ways. Some will work directly with our issuer, others will create pools, et cetera. However, we don't want the consumer to have to think about USAT versus USDT. We want this to be Tether, and we'll brand that way and market that way and make sure the consumers are educated that they can use these products however they see fit.
Can you talk a little bit about the structure of Tether versus the entity that you run, and and how do you work within the Genius Act? Because USAT and USDT are not. It sounds like they're going to be easily interoperable, but can you talk about some of the challenges sort of between the two different entities and how they relate to one another?
Sure, yeah. So Tether International is the issuer for USDT, and in our case with USAT, Anchorage will be the issuer, which is now one of two of the only licensed crypto banks in the country. And so, with USAT, obviously fully Genius compliant product, we have to be one-to-one backed with US Treasuries. We have to have, the frequent audits and to follow the rest of the guidance and standards that are set forth there. We'll be able to do that fairly easily with the separate reserve process and the separate issuance that exist. However, long-term, I believe that, reciprocity will be very important. And we'll watch what Treasury does with rulemaking there and implementation. However, I can say firmly that I strongly believe that USDT will receive reciprocity at some point as we work to be, just inside of the same standard as USAT and recognized as such. And, we're firmly confident that we'll be able to get there. And so for right now, I think it's about providing consumers with optionality of these products. And then as we continue to work and push towards the reciprocity standards, I think we'll be in a fantastic place, and Tether will be Tether.
Okay. I was talking with some folks this morning, and one question that sort of came up is, and we've seen this on the legislative front as well, is that President Trump can be a very divisive character. People love him, people hate him, people are in between. What happens in a world where there's maybe a change of political control at the White House or in Congress? And how are you sort of thinking about and preparing for a moment like that, where maybe because of your background or because of the relationship with Cantor and the Commerce Secretary, et cetera, how are you preparing for that moment so that the company can continue to be effective even in a change of political environment?
Yeah, well, look, I hope that my work product in the White House speaks for at least my ability to work across the aisle and find common sense resolutions that are best for the American people. And I know that's what the president's been keenly focused on as well. Financial technology should be one of the least partisan verticals that we operate within. And we should all want the United States to be uniquely positioned as the leader and basically the beacon of development for this ecosystem. And regardless of party affiliation, I think this is one instance in which we can actually put that aside and work together to build and protect the U.S. I think Tether plays an integral role in that. I don't think that there's a more important public-private sector relationship that exists on planet Earth, given the fact that we are the largest private customer of the Treasury. I think this year we might be in the top 10 of largest purchasers of U.S. debt in the world, including all countries. And right now we're the 17th largest holder of U.S. Treasuries in the world, including all countries. And so, regardless of administrative changes, I'm going to stay keenly focused on ensuring that the ecosystem continues to grow here in the U.S. And that's why we wanted to do what Genius intended, which was to bring, in my opinion, what is undoubtedly one of the most important players in the ecosystem to U.S. soil and allow us to build and use their knowledge and expertise to innovate here in the United States. And that won't change regardless of who's in the White House. But I'm very hopeful and optimistic that Republicans will maintain their position, given the fact that they've been so friendly to the ecosystem. And that has been very refreshing for obviously many people to see that are here. And that's where my partisanship comes out a little bit. But at the end of the day, we're willing to work with whoever to make sure the United States is the leader in this space.
Do you guys have plans to get involved in the policy and political front in an effort to sort of keep the forces aligned?
Oh, Kristen, you know me. I can't stay away for too long. Absolutely. We'll see what that looks like. I'll probably have more news to share in the coming months on that.
Okay. One other question is what does the team look like? Like, who are you looking to bring on board? Like, what are the types of roles that you're planning to build out, and what's sort of the timeline for that?
Well, look, Tether generally is a lean machine, and I think that we'll follow that same model here in the U.S. That being said, we're certainly expanding, and so for the time being, we're looking at folks that we would call expansion managers on our team, people that are working to create this horizontal integration and vertical integrations with the banks, and more or less create the infrastructure throughout the rest of the country. So those are the first hires, and then we're able to lean on a lot of the technical expertise we have from Tether International, which is great, and we'll probably pull some folks from that side over to us. But at the end of the day, the entire Tether team is working together on USAT, and I think that yes, there will be healthy expansion in the US, but we'll climb to that slowly over time. We're not going to race to be too big and too clunky too fast. We want to be able to be adaptable and make streamlined decisions.
And just kind of final questions to wrap up here. What compared to the two, I'm curious, which is more stressful, which requires more travel, and which is more fun between the White House and Tether?
Oh man, those are tough. Well, I will say the stress level is about the same, which is fine, and that's something I've become accustomed to. The travel schedule is actually more intense with Tether. I can say that for certain. And then in terms of fun, I mean, it's tough. Fun in different ways. I mean, fun is in the White House, you get to work with so many incredible people like I do at Tether. But it was a longer tail for a reward, right? I mean, you had to build and work and pull these pieces together, and then finally it's there and it's right in front of you. You can't believe that it was able to be pulled off. And working at Tether, it's like every day there's a new challenge, and we solve that challenge and we move on to the next. And so it's a constant reward mechanism that's quite addicting and very fun. And the people here are fantastic. I mean, our founders are incredible people. Paulo is one of the greatest technical experts that possibly exist in the space, and just being around him, being able to learn from him is extremely rewarding. And look, we have just solid folks here too. These are the toughest questions you've asked all day, Kristen. This is hard. I'm gonna say that it's even, but they're different in different ways, and I appreciate both of them very much.
Well, I want to thank you very much. I think, I've been working on these policy issues for 6 years, along with a bunch of other people, and there's a pre-Bo and a post-Bo era of policy, and I think you achieved more in 6 months than the rest of us had combined had an impact over 6 years. So really appreciate everything that you did, and the way that you were able to come in and have such an impact despite really not having operated in Washington before. Your instincts were incredible, and what you have achieved has, I think, truly changed the course of this industry that was really going the other way. So with that, we'll thank Bo for I guess you're over here, Bo. I see you down there. Thank you so much for joining us today, and appreciate everyone here at Multicoin for taking time to listen as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much.